Okay, so welcome to a very long delayed lesson from Unit 8 on thermal pollution. And unlike what you're seeing here with Elmo, it's not going to be water actually catching on fire, but thermal pollution is going to deal with like water that could burn you. So, very hot water. So, what is thermal pollution? It's when you release hot water into a local waterway. That increases the temperature of that waterway, and that can have negative impacts on organisms, which is something that we're going to discuss in a little bit. So, what are some of the sources of thermal pollution? Any sort of industrial process or factory, anything that uses water either to absorb heat and cool down machinery, for example, or as part of electricity generation. Remember, the first step in a lot of forms of electricity generation is heating up water to form steam so that it can turn a turbine. Then if you take that water and you release it into a local waterway, it'll raise the temperature of the water. So why is that a big deal? Well, it has an impact on how much gas can be dissolved in a liquid. If you have ever drank a cold soda versus a warm soda, if you drink a cold soda, chances are you're going to have to burp soon after that because it's got a lot of carbon dioxide dissolved in it, a lot of dissolved gas. On the other hand, if you're drinking a warm soda, probably not as much burping going on because that warm liquid can't hold as much dissolved gas. So here we see these two diagrams. One of these is a cup of cold water, the other is a cup of warm water. And if you count them, you'll notice there's equal amounts of these bubbles in each glass. It's just in the cold water, all of it is dissolved in the water because cold water can hold more gas. If you look at the cup on the right that has the warm water, represented by, the red liquid, you'll notice that most of the gas is not dissolved in the water. So this is relevant to living creatures because remember, just because you are an animal living in underwater doesn't mean you don't need oxygen. You need dissolved oxygen in order to survive. You can asphyxiate underwater if there's not enough DO2. So if you warm up the temperature of water, you're decreasing the amount of dissolved oxygen it can hold, which means you're decreasing the amount of animals that can be supported in that body of water. So here is that just in a larger diagram. So when you add thermal energy to a water source, whether it's heating the water or adding in water that's already hot, you are decreasing the amount of dissolved oxygen in that water. Um, so that can create hypoxic conditions, and that hypoxia can then lead to a decrease in the population of local animals and can even lead to die-offs. Another thing is, if you remember from when we were in Unit 1 and 2, we talked about the range of tolerance that organisms have. This is especially important for aquatic organisms. They tend to have a narrow range of tolerance. So, for example, they might survive best between like 18 degrees Celsius and 22 degrees Celsius. They tend to have narrower ranges of these abiotic conditions in which they can be healthy and survive. If you take one of these environmental factors and you raise it above or lower it below the range of tolerance, the organisms will be less healthy. They'll have more problems maintaining homeostasis, and they're more likely to get sick, meaning the population could potentially decrease. And all of that has negative impacts on organisms. So, the end result of this is that some of these plants have to find ways to reduce the amount of thermal pollution that they're letting out. So, they have to cool down water to kind of ambient or local temperatures before they release it. Otherwise, the fish won't be sweating, but they're going to be gasping for air.